The spiritual transition is actually a ritual that many species throughout the universe may refer to in their own terms, such as shamanism or seance, ways to communicate with the spiritual realms from lower dimensions than that of which they are available. To put it in a different way, the spiritual realms are any dimensions starting from the fifth. It is uncertain what these dimensions truly look like, but the general scope of the fifth dimension is often referred to as a picture on a children's book: a blue sky on a green ground. These ideas and concepts have been around, well, forever. To fully understand what these rituals entail, we should first define what the spiritual transition is. Before we can explain that, we must first explain how the universes came about in the first place. This is in no way representative of any recognized theories or so-called facts, but merely represent my beliefs on the way in which our universe is formed and how. The universe is divided in two different main subjects, the void and the vacuum, both completely invisible and unknown to this very day. They both form the very existence of our universe, but does not necessarily mean anything. The void can also be known as the Tempered Vortex, a wormhole whose purpose is to connect one fractured connection of the universe to another, like a teleport. But the Tempered Vortex has a different role. It filters energy based on its molecular structure and divides it up into subparticles, allowing subatomic energies to grow. It is the electrical manifestation of the void that produces large quantities of energy from one universe and clones it in another, forming the basic structure of that universe while it grows. Every single universe ever created came from another universe. This is a never-ending process. Of course, not all things can survive. Suns burn out all of their energy until it forms a black hole, collapsing in on itself and pulling everything else in its path into it, crushing it into nothingness. This process is just as natural as life itself, to make room for younger generations. Think of the multiverse, or the massive emptiness of all universes combined, as your washing up bowl. As you put washing up liquid into your sink and turn on the hot water tap, you see bubbles form. The washing up liquid is the structure produced by another universe, the subparticles that allow subatomic energy to grow. The hot water as a powerful source, or the void, and the water in the bowl as the ever-growing universe we exist in, with each bubble representing the galaxy. Eventually, these bubbles will die out as the water goes colder, much like how galaxies will eventually die to suns growing colder and collapsing in on itself. The water grows mucky, just how life will grow dire. This is a never-ending natural process that we must acknowledge. The sole purpose of life is not to survive, but to learn through a greater cause, an intelligence that is far greater than mere survival. As a human, we are simply living a life within a body formed by nature, a natural process that can be argued by evolution, or that we come from another planet, whatever your opinion is on where we came from. I have my own, of course, and wish to share it. Because I believe spiritually, I also believe that we're not the first humans in the universe. In fact, I believe there are many spiritual creatures, all of which come from all kinds of dimensions. In the story of the spiritual transition, the 5 main races are the Mayron, the Phi, the Toa, the Hodir, and the Homo sapiens. That is right, we are a race of a species which I believe to be called the Palvian. The Palvian is a species of soul families, divided into a group of the 4 major magical divinations, the Sancrian, the Valtian, the Daedrian, and of course the Palvian. Soul families are very large and organized groups of specific roles in which to play as a consciousness. The Palvian attempt to seek peace and tolerance, and thus they create realities based on testing these and creating individual subconsciousness to place them on a journey toward that path. It is our job as part of the Palvian group to seek patience and tolerance. The situations and our fate ties greatly with the aims of this group, and we should strive toward it. It is the same for the other 3 groups. The The Sankhrian attempt to justify time, so they create realities under the illusion that time exists, and places subconsciousness into the fourth dimension to maintain time itself. The Valdian attempt to restore balance, so they set out a subconsciousness purely to bring about perfect balance in the environments that they are destined to live in. And finally, the Daedrian attempt to bring reasonable justice to the other three groups. The Daedrian are a unique group in that they do not have a collective of subconsciousness that they would individually set out on an adventure. Instead, their role is to punish a consciousness for their wrongdoing based on a universal law, a universal order that all consciousness share as the main basis of rules. You know it is not a crime when your actions were made solely to survive or to protect those of whom you love and care for. That rule is in place to form basic natural rights. We have survival instincts that inherit the grand design of all universal law and everything that it entails, which is merely for survival. All other actions are recorded by yourself, as a subconsciousness, and reviewed at the time of your death. It is at that point that you judge yourself, view back the memories and pass on your mistakes so that you may learn them in future lives. It is because of this that there are many lives with a consciousness so young that their actions may be very animalistic, while older consciousness may appear wiser with their young physical age. The younger generation in this day and age will become wiser, and the elder generation becomes dire. Here's that story with the water in the bowl again. As new intelligence rises, old ones will fall, and a new era will take place. This, again, is a natural process that we must acknowledge. Of course, there are many who disagree, and would go out of their way to disprove this by committing crimes against nature and dividing society. Those who are otherwise very intelligent, known as indigo children, are often referred to as being autistic. While it gives others absolutely no right to harm them, it is still a label nonetheless, like all the rest, designed to divide and conquer. We must learn from this. We must advance as a race. Without advancement, there comes a time when there may be no point to our lives anymore. That is where the spiritual transition comes in. This ritual, designed to allow younger generations to restore the intelligence of their race and strive toward patience and tolerance in the long term. It is the spiritual transition where all things begin and end. The Homo sapiens was the last race of the Palvian to enter our universe. Entering the world known as Nak-Nari, the Homo sapiens lived in utter peace and filled with love. They were also very intelligent, wise, and powerful. It was this near perfection for 16,000 years that the Palvian realized that this species was almost pointless. Even the race themselves at this time knew that this was more than strange. Tornadoes, tsunamis, and earthquakes trembled across the planet purely to wipe out the Homo sapiens, but few did survive the otherwise extinction. The Homo sapiens did their best to gather all the knowledge they once had and build a spaceship out of the debris of their homes and resources. It would last only 300 years, but the planet looked as so out of place and complete with cliffs and deserts. As they travelled throughout the universe, they started to go hungry, starving even. There was little hope for them, and the adults started to cook their own children for survival. The Palvian consciousness was retracted for eternity from creating any further individual consciousness, and the Elder Council agreed that the Palvian be demoted to the 9th dimension. It is a crime against nature to deal so much natural damage without the permission of the planet's elemental spirits, yet the Palvian committed anyway. Their defense was that the goal of the Palvian race is to seek patience and tolerance, and if they had not created a situation where the Homo sapiens would have to deal with pain and suffering, that their lives would be meaningless. However, the Daedrian quarter argued that the damage was so extreme that it was not just Homo sapiens that suffered, it was all other animals and plants. The elements of the planet also argued that they were forced to commit the damage by the Palvian. The Palvian understood that they committed slavery, a universal violation, but disagree that they should be punished for a situation that would not have happened without them. The Great Consciousness emerged with the Elder Council to give its full acknowledgement and understanding this situation, and stated the following. Palvian's goals is to align its subordinates with its ultimate understanding of the universe. In the end, if a race has already settled in the goals and have aligned themselves with the Palvian way of life, their lives may not see their own potential in conflicts that would otherwise arise should they not follow it. However, I do recognize the Palvian did commit such a crime that has caused the race to become nearly extinct. This is an overreaction, and the Palvian could have very easily caused supernatural beings to be consumed for the purposes of situational cause. It is your ignorance of this that you shall be demoted. The race will suffer as you will suffer, and they will fall through the dimensions until you have learned from your mistakes. The Daedrian looked among the crowd of the Palvian and acknowledged their defeat in the court that time, but the Palvian were not impressed. In sway of their ignorance, they further their cause and corrupt the Homo sapiens as they find a new home planet. Meanwhile, as the Homo sapiens reached the planet of Tas-el-Dor on the outskirts of the Jani galaxy, they slaughtered millions of humanoids without question and took the planet for themselves. The corruption of the Palvian had already reached them. As they emerged from their spaceship, the native races trembled in fear and terror of their onslaught, with little hope left. The Homo sapiens enslaved them, and the women and children of the Homo sapiens settled on the planet hoping to rebuild their lives. After 300 years of slavery, the native races eventually learned courage and a world of war broke out. This led to catastrophic disaster for both the races, but the Homo sapiens eventually wiped them out, and the race that was known as the Yonki became extinct. Over 10 million years, the Homo sapiens used this time to rebuild what was left of this forgotten race, and over time the populace became from just 3,000 to 2 billion. When the Palvian realized that the corruption had led to the extinction of one of their races, they said no more. But instead of doing the wrong thing and repeating the past, they returned to the Elder Council to meet with the Daedrian that would punish them as according to universal law. "Thank you for approaching us this time," a Daedrian representative said. "You have done the correct thing by bringing this news to us. We will do what we can to ensure that these races are punished accordingly." "Why is it that the Daedrian are allowed to do this, but not us?" a Palvian representative asked the court. "Why is the responsibility of our races being taken away and delegated to a species that believes they can do better than us?" "You may still be a part of our world, Palvian, but that does not mean you can answer back. You know how the universe works. You should acknowledge its bureaucracy," the Daedrian responded. The Great Consciousness emerged once again. "The universe is not bureaucratic. It is designed by nature and of its great whole purely as a cooperative goal. Please do not bring political conflict and petty lies to this court." "Will anyone answer my question?" the Palvian demanded. "Delegation of one's races to be punished by another is purely by the spiritual binding that you signed to the species, or does that spiritual binding no longer offer its services, Palvian?" the Great Consciousness asked. "The Palvian are becoming corrupt, Great One. Can you not see the false intentions of these species? They are now questioning their own authority on the basis of spiritual binding that they are clearly ignorant to," a Sancrian representative acknowledged. The Palvian struck out at this statement without goodwill. "You are completely misunderstanding us. How dare you speak out against us?" "Order shall be restored in this court, or should I demote you all?" The Great Consciousness amplified as the atmosphere became moist and damp. The Great Consciousness returned to a neutral phase before uttering its final intent. "The Palvian are asking the court of the Elder Council what should be done about the Homo sapiens. They were once a strong, intelligent, and wise race. Their will has been hell-bent by the torture of the Palvian, and now they seek to offer the Homo sapiens a way to seek peace. I demand that a new concept shall be in order. With the cooperation of all species in this room, I declare a union. From this day forward, all species may now represent to their own spiritual pact an implied binding that allows for the lower dimensions to connect to the higher in spiritual aid of bringing peace and harmony. I shall call it the spiritual transition. Your aims now are to aid your own species into bringing about peace and harmony, and you must encourage it. It is entirely the freedoms of your species to acknowledge or refuse this offer of aid, but you must not force them to follow our ways. I shall now leave this to your own doing. Bring peace to this universe and make me proud. Make the whole proud. And there it begins. The spiritual transition has been initiated, and all of life shall be renewed in this new form of deliverance and acceptance.